one of the challenges of psychology is measuring these things that you can't kind of objectively measure, or you can't directly measure. So if I told you measure height, you could measure height and you would be very exact, right? And everybody would agree, right? So if people measured me, let's go back to Michael B. Jordan. If you measured Michael B. Jordan, you'd be like, he's 5'10". If somebody else did it, they'd be like, he's 5'10". And clearly we're measuring his height. When you measure something like depression or self-esteem, you can't see it. I can't go to you with a tape measure and say, this is how much depression you have. So we need to have ways of measuring it, and the ways of measuring it are not always clear whether they're the right way to measure it. So like you said, with self-esteem, people might lie. And there's a number of different measures for self-esteem that try to get around those issues. And we'll talk about that when we talk about things in validity. So things like face validity and test-retest reliability, things like that. All right, so importantly though, all of those can be different. In a single person over time, in different people, that's what makes them variables. All right, so once you have a variable, right, let's stick with depression here. Let's say that you've determined, yes, people differ on depression, and you want to do research on depression. One of the first things that you need to do is you need to come up with an operational definition of depression. And this is so you can actually do the work. That's one of the big reasons for the operational definition. So the easiest way to emphasize the operational definition is to contrast it with the conceptual definition. So the conceptual definition of a variable, very different from the operational definition. Your conceptual definition is what you get in your typical dictionary definition. So that's your typical dictionary definition. Your operational definition is not your dictionary definition. It is the set of procedures, the actual physical moves that you are going to do in order to measure that or manipulate that particular variable. So it's literally what are the operations that you do to measure this particular variable. So that's very important to know. You have to very well define the set of procedures that you're using. So, for example, depression. There's a conceptual definition of depression. There's an operational definition of depression. So the conceptual definition of depression is this is a condition of general emotional dejection and withdrawal. Sadness greater and more prolonged than that warranted by any objective reason. All right, so that's your conceptual definition. And if I told you that's what depression is, most of you it would make sense. You'd be like, oh yeah, that's what depression is. I get it. That's the syndrome of depression. And that's very useful. We need to have these conceptual definitions of what a variable is. But if I was researching depression, and you came into my lab and you said, oh, I want to participate in research. I want to be a research assistant. And I said, okay, great. I got a subject that's coming in, and I want you to measure their depression. And you say to me, all right, perfect. How do I do that? And I say, oh, okay, well, just measure their condition of general emotional dejection and withdrawal. Just measure if they have sadness greater and more prolonged than that warranted by objective reasoning. Go ahead, measure it. What do? You have no idea. You know what depression is, but you can't move on with the research because how do you get to this? How do you get to this internal number that a person has, this internal variable that a person has? Well, you get to it by the operational definition. So the operational definition for depression, one operational definition, is literally the score on the Beck's Depression Inventory. And if I told you when you walked in and wanted to be a research assistant, and I said, all right, great, I got a subject coming in today, I would like you to measure their depression, take this Beck's Depression Inventory, give it to them, ask them to read it, they get half an hour to finish it, and then we'll score it according to this answer key. In that case, you know exactly how to measure depression. You know exactly what to do. So on the one hand, this helps you understand what depression is, doesn't let you measure it whatsoever. On the other hand, this allows you to measure it, allows you to do the research, doesn't really tell you what it is. So if somebody who has never heard of depression asks you, oh, you're in psychology, what's depression? And you said, oh, well, it's the score you get when you fill out these papers, and I score it with this answer key. They'd be like, well, what is it? I don't even understand. Is it, is it my reaction time? Is it this? Is it this? This tells you very little about what it is, but it tells you how to measure it. So it's very, very important, because without this, you can't do the research. Without this, you're that research assistant stuck with this no operational definition that doesn't allow you to go forward. All right, so any questions on what an operational definition is? Perfect. All right, so we alluded to some benefits of operational definitions. This is the first one. It allows your variable to be studied. It literally allows you to do the research, and without it, you can't even start. So with that set of procedures, with this, there's literally nothing you can do. With that, you can measure depression. You can tell who's high on it, who's low on depression, who's in the middle. That will allow you to actually measure the variable, actually allow you to study and do the test. The other thing that an operational variable will do is it will force a scientist to discuss these abstract concepts in very concrete terms. It will force a scientist to get very precise about what they're talking about. It'll force a scientist to go away from the sort of hand-waving general definitions to something that is well-defined, precise, well thought out, makes sense. It's the only way to get to an operational definition. So if I was looking at depression, and I said it's a condition of general emotional dejection, if I want to translate this into an operational definition, I need to ask, what is emotional dejection? What does that look like? How can I measure it? What aspects are there to emotional dejection? What aspects are there to withdrawal? What aspects, how long is prolonged, right, than objective reason? How much is greater than objective reason? So those are the questions that were answered on the Beck's Depression Inventory, because they literally have questions where they're like, have you experienced sadness lasting longer than a day, lasting longer than a week, lasting longer than a month, right? They'll have those questions in there because somebody got very specific and precise on what is prolonged, how long is prolonged. So that's the other thing that it does. And I'll give you an outside of psychology, well, I guess it's still in psychology, example of this, but that comes from the Me Too movement. So the Me Too movement was a great example of the need of operational definitions in order to force people to discuss these abstract concepts in concrete terms. So if you remember, and this is actually from a while ago, and I can't believe it's the process for this is so slow. But anyways, I think Bill Cosby's the only one that's actually been sentenced from this movement. But when news about Harvey Weinstein broke, nobody was defending him. I shouldn't say nobody. Most people were not defending him. Most people looked at what he did and said, that is sexual assault. He sexually assaulted those women. When Kevin Spacey's incidences came out, most people, the vast majority, took a look at it and said, that is sexual assault. He sexually assaulted those men, right? So when these two came out, there was very little debate because they had operational definitions. They crossed the legal line that is very well established that this is what's legal on this side, and you've crossed over here. So it was very precisely defined. It was very well laid out. So when they mentioned, okay, these are his behaviors and these were Kevin Spacey's behaviors, everybody was like, oh yes, we've been very clear on that. That is sexual assault. That was the case with Weinstein and Spacey. That did not happen with Aziz Ansari. And the reason it didn't happen was because he didn't cross a well-specified boundary. He didn't do something that was illegal. So when people were saying, well, was it assault or was it just an awkward date? Was it his responsibility to make sure that she's okay, or was it her responsibility to say, I'm uncomfortable, I'm going to leave? What was the situation? There was tons of debate on this, and I'm not going to come out one side or the other, but I just want to point out, if you went to any article and looked at the comments section, you would see about 50% of the people defending Aziz. You would see about 50% of the people condemning Aziz. If you went to articles about these two, you would see 98 of the people condemning their actions. And, the internet's the internet, so you know what the other 2% are doing. But importantly, their behavior was very well operationally defined as assault. Aziz's, not so well defined. So people had a hard time figuring out, is it not, because they were not clear about those abstract concepts. They were not clear about the abstract idea of this is assault, this is consent. They were not clear enough about that to say whether or not his behaviors fell into one camp or the other. All right, and the last thing about operational definitions that makes them very beneficial, very useful, is they help scientists communicate their ideas with others. Basically, it lets you tell a scientist exactly what you did and how you did it, and that lets you know if you're on the same page or if you're not on the same page. So I'll give you an example of this. Let's say that, again, we'll stick with depression. Let's say that you're looking in the effects of social media on depression. And there's a variety of different views on this. Some people are like, well, social media is causing depression. Other people are like, no, social media is actually a buffer against depression. So let's say that you are doing research and you're using the Beck's Depression Inventory, and your results indicate social media does not cause depression, right? That's what your results indicate. And then you get on the phone with another scientist who's doing similar research, and they say, oh, no, I've done what you've done. I've done the same experiment. Social media does cause depression. And you would say, no. Did you have a variety of subjects, males and females? And they're like, yes, we had a variety of subjects, males and females. And you're like, I don't know why I'm doing this. Did you have a variety of subjects, male and female? Yes, we did. Did you, do a pre-test and post-test? Yes, we did. Did you measure their hours on social media? Yes, that's exactly what we did. You did everything that we did. Yes, we did everything that you did. So why are we getting these two different results? Most of the time, it's because you're using different operational definitions. Most of the time, it's going to come out that you ran your study using the Beck's Depression Inventory. They ran their study using the Zung. This is another depression test questionnaire. I forget what the SDS stands for, but anyways, this is a different operational definition. This is a different way of measuring depression. So give them the Beck's Depression Inventory and score it. That's one operational definition. Give them the Zung depression test and score it. That's another operational definition. And once you figure out that those are your two different operational definitions, all of a sudden it makes sense why you might have gotten the result that social media does not cause depression. They might have gotten the result that social media does cause depression. And not only that, it tells you where to look. It also says whatever the Beck's Depression Inventory is measuring and whatever Zung's test is measuring, we can take a look at their tests and see what they're measuring differently, see what they might be emphasizing differently. It gives you a way in to, again, use those deduction skills and figure out it's gotta be something with the difference between how those two are defining things. So it helps you communicate. Without the operational definition, those two scientists would have been going back and forth for years, saying your study was not good. No, your study was not good. You didn't use a good measures. No, you didn't use. It wouldn't progress the field. So these operational definitions help scientists communicate. All right. So any questions on operational definitions? All right.